The courtroom was filled to the brim. Each seat was taken, each gaze fixed on one man, Kody Brown. The former proud leader of the Sister Wives clan sat now in a suit that seemed to be too small. His complexion washed out under the bright lights of the courtroom. The charm was gone, the swagger, the loud voice that had ruled four women and their vision for familial harmony. And now, in this hushed, constrictive courtroom, Kody Brown resembled a man backed into a corner by reality. By his side was Robyn, her hand shaking against a rumpled tissue. Across the aisle, Christine, Janelle and Meri leaned close together, whispering, their faces a blend of anguish, hurt, and resolve. These weren't women scorned. They were women striking back. And while the judge was poised to render a verdict that would shatter the very cornerstone of the Brown family legacy, the world at large held its breath. Fans, critics, and media recognized this wasn't simply another reality show controversy. This was the ultimate downfall of a family dynasty, founded on secrecy, deception, and an image of precision. The tale had started many years earlier, naturally. Before the courtroom. Before it all started, back when there were only dreams. Dreams of Flagstaff land. Homes together side by side, children on big green yards playing. Kody peddled that dream to each of the wives, saying it was for them, for their children, for the legacy. Dreams, however, are delicate. And where money comes into the mix, dreams become nightmares. It was Christine who first noticed the cracks. She recalled standing with her daughters on a plot of land, pointing to a hill and telling them, "This will be our home." But then there was the betrayal. The land was sold, not divided. The future that Kody had promised was erased, replaced with contracts, receipts, and rumors of duplicity. Practical and strong as she was, Janelle started to notice the figures not adding up. Missing money, hidden accounts, unexplained expenditures. She found more than $75,000 had been transferred out of family accounts, money intended for the kids, the houses, and the future that they were all creating as a family. Meri, quiet but watchful, held back initially, but even she couldn't deny the mounting proof. Betrayal didn't occur under one's breath. There was a soundtrack, every broken vow, every fiscal falsehood, every deception disguised as leadership in the family. And Robyn, the faithful one, the last wife standing by Kody. She had stood up for him, defended him for years, convinced he was doing it to protect the family. But even Robyn had watched as the bank statements came in, as she felt that twisting of her gut. She chose silence, telling herself it was for unity, until silence itself became complicity. When the trial started, the courtroom was transformed into a drama unlike anything TLC had ever aired. Christine was the first to testify on the stand, her voice quivering but firm, revealing Kody's broken promises. She testified about her daughter's aspirations. The land never theirs. The deception destroying hope. Each word was a sword. Each tear was evidence of the concealed pain behind the cameras. Janelle trailed behind, and if Christine's words rattled the room, Janelle's shattered it. Composed, clinical, and with incriminating evidence, she laid out the financial deceit. $75,000 tapped without justification. Receipts, bank statements, transfers, every document of proof, piled against Kody. The court gasped. The wives shared looks of vindication and sadness. And Kody, he exploded, yelling denials, red-faced, his voice bouncing off the marble walls. But the louder he yelled, the guiltier he appeared. Then there was the moment no one foresaw, Robyn's breaking point. Summoned to testify, she cried on the stand, her voice breaking as she acknowledged that she had known about the money. She admitted that she decided not to speak out, that she wanted to believe Kody's schemes, but in her heart she knew the truth. The betrayal went beyond money. It was emotional. And Robyn's tears confirmed what the other wives already suspected. Kody's kingdom was constructed on manipulation, not on love. And so it was left up to the judge. His voice was firm, his expression impassive, as he delivered the ruling that would change the Brown family forever. "Mr. Brown," he started, "this court finds proof of fraud, misappropriation of funds, and breach of trust. Thus, the properties will revert to joint ownership by Christine, Janelle and Meri Brown. In addition, restitution for lost funds will be sought. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted in gasps, screams, and yells. Christine cried, relief etched on her face. Janelle held the papers, triumphant but shattered. Meri nodded wordlessly, strength evident in her quietness. Robyn fell into sobs, free at last, but shattered. And Kody, he sat rigid, his kingdom falling apart, his control lost, his name now synonymous with betrayal and loss. Outside the courthouse, cameras popped like lightning. Journalists yelled questions. Fans shrieked. The wives exited collectively, victorious in unison, more resilient in solidarity. Kody lagged behind, solitary, his face somber, his image destroyed. The news spread like fire. Headlines blazed on every television. Kody Brown destroyed by judge's final decision. This wasn't courtroom theatrics. This was the downfall of an empire, the downfall of the patriarch's reign, the surprising truth at last revealed to the world. And as the echo of the gavel dissipated into history, one thing was certain. The sister wives weren't merely survivors of betrayal, they were the winners of justice. Because ultimately, the family that once stood united beneath Kody's authority had discovered their strength not in him, but in one another. The air was thick, near suffocating, as the Brown family courtroom battle commenced. It wasn't a silence that was comfortable, it was biting, electric, and filled with things left unspoken. Everyone present in the room was aware that this was not just another case. This was history in the making. A family once celebrated on TV, paraded as a perfect picture of love and togetherness, torn apart now under the harsh, uncaring lights of a courtroom. Kody Brown sat slumped over the defense table, his wide shoulders bent forward, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had whitened. His characteristic bluster, the cocky voice that had once ruled his wives and enthralled millions of TV viewers, was absent. Instead, his eyes flicked furtively about the room, toward the judge, toward the packed gallery of reporters, and most acutely, toward the three women who had once lived with him, had borne his children, shared his life. Christine was sitting straight, chin raised, eyes unflinching. She was not there only as a plaintiff. She was there as a mother standing up for the aspirations of her children. Next to her sat Janelle, silent but clearly angry, her lips compressed tight together, as if holding back years of pent-up anger. Next to Christine sat Meri, stiff, face cold but controlled, betrayal etched across her face, though not a word was spoken. And then there was Robyn, the fourth wife, the favorite, the one who had remained with Kody when the others had walked away. She sat beside Kody, but her hand trembled as she clutched a tissue, her face colorless and expression inscrutable. Her devotion faltered in that instant, her silence more eloquent than speech. The audience could sense the tension scratching against their skin. Reporters murmured into their tape recorders. Court sketch artists sketched in desperation, and fans who had watched the sister wives drama for years leaned forward, intently hoping to catch every detail. And then, the room changed. The bailiff's deep voice shattered the quiet. All rise for the Honorable Judge Harrison. Chairs scraped on the floor as everyone rose to their feet. The judge, a stern-faced older man with piercing eyes, came in with deliberate steps. His black robe billowed behind him as he mounted the bench and sat down, surveying the room like a man ready to untangle decades of mystery. "Be seated," he stated, his voice firm and commanding. The room complied, but the silence was there, a silence so profound that even the falling of a pen would have boomed like thunder. Judge Harrison pushed back his glasses, looked through his notes, and started. Brown versus Brown is a case that centers on fraud, mismanagement of funds, and breach of trust in what was once a household that had been publicly known to be traditionally unconventional. At issue here is not so much property or funds, but the bedrock of trust upon which this family was founded. Each word struck like a sledge. Kody swallowed, his Adam's apple moving visibly. Christine looked at Janelle, then at the judge, her lips compressing. The judge continued, "We are here to determine the rightful ownership of properties in Flagstaff and the accountability of financial decisions made by Mr. Kody Brown. Both sides will present evidence, testimonies and arguments. This court expects truth, clarity and respect. Emotions may run high, but the law remains clear. His gavel struck once, sending a sharp crack through the air. Let the proceedings begin. All eyes turned to Kody. The once proud patriarch now seemed smaller. His charisma evaporated under the glare of reality. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering frantically. His voice carried just enough for those close by to hear fragments. They're exaggerating. I never promised that, they'll twist everything. But the wives sat silently, their quiet more scathing than any word. Each knew this was her time, the pinnacle of years of vows broken and allegiances violated. Christine looked at Kody for a fleeting moment, her gaze not filled with fear, but with flames. Janelle gritted her teeth as she drummed her finger on the arm of her chair, firm but restless. Meri folded her arms across her chest, looking forward, not even giving the existence of Kody a nod. And Robyn? She wiped her eyes with her tissue. But even that small gesture was freighted with significance. Was it grief? Was it regret? Or was it fear that the well-rehearsed photo of togetherness was in danger of being destroyed forever? The courtroom wasn't only full of people, it was full of expectation. Witnesses understood that what they were about to hear wasn't only legal jargon, it was the unwrap of one of America's most well-known polygamous clans. It was betrayal exposed, love turned to fury, and dreams turned to ashes. The cameras didn't roll, but the audience was transported inside an unscripted show of reality, one that had no edits, no producers, and no family spin to manipulate the ending. This was raw. This was real. And as the lawyers rustled through their papers, ready to call the first witness, the wives seemed prepared, not to recount their pain, but to reveal it. Christine was the first one summoned, although she had not yet testified. When her name rang out in the courtroom, she rose slowly, smoothing her blazer, looking at Kody. For years she'd smiled through tears, been the good wife, swallowed her questions. But now her eyes were not that at all, they were steel. She strode by Kody without a second look. But in that silence, in that deliberate step, she spoke volumes. She was no longer the wife who believed in his aspirations. She was the woman who had been betrayed. And now she was the woman who would reveal the truth to the world. Kody's jaw spasmed as she passed by. Robyn went to grab his arm, but he jerked it back. The space between them grew, not only physically but emotionally as well, as if the air around them had made up its mind to put them on opposite sides of history. But before Christine could say anything, Judge Harrison held up a hand. Before we hear testimony, I want this court to know something. He leaned in, his gaze drilling into Kody, then raking across the wives. This is not reality television. This is not entertainment. This is a court of law. And where the public sits and watches in a state of fascination, this court's responsibility is to distinguish truth from fantasy. His words landed heavy as stones. The wives bowed their heads in respect. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This is about accountability, the judge concluded. And accountability will be found. The silence that followed was deafening. That initial session wasn't a firework-filled night. Not yet. It was a silent one. The kind that wraps itself around your chest and refuses to release you. Each stare, each sigh, each hushed shuffle bore the burden of decades of strife. The silence of the wives was a weapon. The silence of Kody was a confession. The silence of Robyn was an unanswered question. It was the sort of quiet that spoke to everyone who was watching. Something big was going to go down. And as Christine stood to speak, the crowd leaned forward. The journalists' pens poised. The cameras outside poised to capture the storm to come. Because everyone in that courtroom was well aware of what the truth was. This wasn't the start of a trial. This was the start of the end. The courtroom swayed as Kody Brown rose, her name being called to the stand. She stood tall with deliberate resolve. But everyone present could feel the storm brewing within her. Her eyes, which had been steady and unwavering all these years, had fixed on Kody. For years they had seen him with trust, with love, even with hurt, but now, they blazed with betrayal. She passed him by without compunction, her steps ringing out over the quiet courtroom floor. Kody attempted to meet her eyes, but she didn't blink. She didn't give him the respect of acknowledgement. This was no longer about ancient wounds for Christine. It was about justice, truth, and her children. She was sworn in by the bailiff, and put her hand on the Bible, her voice firm as she replied, I do. She then sat back, smoothed her blazer, and eyed the judge straight on. Mrs. Brown, Christine's lawyer started. Could you explain to the court, in your own words, why you're here today? Christine breathed slowly, her chest heaving, as if drawing up the power of every shattered promise. Then she spoke, her voice cut and measured. It began with a dream, Christine explained, her voice steady but just slightly shaking with feeling. Kody shared with us the land in Flagstaff. He said that it was for all of us. He spoke of this vision of our families dwelling side by side, our children playing together, and each of the wives having her own house, but bound by this dream of oneness. She hesitated, her gaze darting to Kody, who sat there with his jaw locked, his fists clenching on the table. I trusted him, she went on. We all did. He made us feel like we were part of something greater than ourselves. We gave up for it. We invested in it. I even instructed my daughters to begin envisioning what their lives would be like there. I told them where our home would be, where they could have a garden, where they would play. Christine's voice broke as tears filled her eyes. I built that dream in their hearts. And then, she stopped, swallowing hard. Then I discovered it was a lie. Her lawyer pushed a pile of documents towards her. Can you elucidate these to the court? Christine nodded, turning pages. The first was a signed document, indicating the sale of a tract of land that had once been promised to her and her children. This land, she explained, holding it up for the judge to view, was to be ours. He assured me it was reserved for my family, but he sold it without informing me. I didn't discover it until months after, when the documents turned up, and when I questioned him, he waved it off. He told me it was business. Christine's voice became cold. But this was not business. This was my children's future. This was their home. She brandished a new document, this one a string of text messages between her and Kody. The courtroom was silent, while the messages were read. Kody, don't worry, Christine, your lot is safe. You'll get your house near the hill. Christine, I'm holding you to that. The kids are so excited. Kody, of course. Trust me. Christine threw the papers onto the table in front of her. Trust me. That's what he always said. But what he meant was, trust me until I don't feel like keeping my word. The gallery gasped. Even the judge leaned forward a little, his pen scratching across his notes. Lastly, Christine faced Kody and turned in her seat. Her voice was no longer shaking, but firm with anger. You lied to me, Kody. You lied to our kids. You got them to believe in something that never was. Do you know what it's like to look into your daughter's eyes and tell her the house that she had a dream about doesn't exist? Do you know what it's like to watch her heart shatter because her father decided to choose money over her life? Tears streamed down Christine's face, but she did not crack. She did not weaken. You didn't betray me. You betrayed them. The courtroom fell into whispers. Reporters wrote down everything, their pens flying. Robyn shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes pale, her hands gripping the tissue more tightly. Janelle nodded almost imperceptibly, her lips tightened, silently assenting to Christine's words. Meri sat frozen, her gaze on the judge, but a flash of satisfaction crossed her face. Kody, his silence finally unbearable, pushed forward, his voice thundering. That's not true. Christine, you're distorting this. You never got the larger picture. That land was for the family. It was temporary. It was temporary. It was temporary. It was be temporary. Mr. Brown, you will be silent unless addressed. This is Mrs. Brown's testimony, not yours. The tantrum only made Kody appear weaker, more desperate. Christine didn't even blink. She faced the judge once more, a serene look returning to her face. That's how it was always, she said in a gentle voice. Whenever I asked him questions, whenever I demanded the truth, he yelled me down. He belittled me. But I'm not small anymore. And I won't be quiet now. Christine changed gears, addressing the judge, but her voice echoing throughout the courtroom. This isn't about money. It isn't about property. It's about trust, about faith, about years of commitment that he discarded. We structured our lives around his promises, and he broke them one by one. I remained quiet for far too long, thinking that perhaps he'd get it together, that perhaps he'd own up. But whenever I remained silent, he became more brazen. He believed we'd never call him out. But today in this place, I'm calling him out, not just for me, not just for the other wives, but for each of the children who thought their father cared more about their future than his own ego. Her words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. The gallery was filled with whispers, people nodding their heads, some wiping tears away. It was not just testimony. It was confession, revelation, and accusation all in one. Even Robyn, who had remained quiet until this point, was unable to contain herself. She covered her face with her hands and wept, tears streaming down, while Kody sat rigid, his face red with anger. Janelle reached over and grabbed Christine's hand as she stepped off the stand, squeezing hard. Meri smiled at her, a small nod of silent recognition that her voice had borne the weight of all their hurt. And Kody, he remained stuck, caught in the glare of truth. His kingdom, his reputation, his control, all melting away. As she stepped off the stand, Christine stopped, her voice gentle but unbreakable. Once you said to me, Kody, that family was the most important thing. But then you seem to forget that family isn't built on property or money. It's built on trust. And you destroyed the trust. And with that, she turned and walked back to her seat, shoulders set, head high. The silence in the room was deafening. Not the kind of silence that came before the storm, but the silence that followed an explosion, when the dust still hung in the air, and everyone was left reeling. And as the judge called for the next witness, the room knew one thing for certain. Kody Brown hadn't just testified, she had detonated the truth. The room was still abuzz with the reverberations of Christine's words when the next name was called by the bailiff. All heads turned as Janelle stood up. She didn't stride or move with visible ire. She moved with an unhurried pace, an even posture, a masked face. But those familiar with her noticed. This was not equanimity born of tranquility. This was the calmness of a woman who had geared up for this moment, of a woman who had harbored evidence, facts, and silent fury within her for years, waiting for the appropriate time to unleash. Christine had provided the court with the tale of shattered promises. Janelle was now going to provide them with evidence. She climbed onto the witness stand, set a hand on the Bible, and swore under oath in a voice strong enough for everyone in the courtroom to hear. When she sat, she didn't glance at Kody. She didn't have to. She already had his focus. His entire body was rigid, his jaw tense, his fingers drumming impatiently against the table. Her lawyer approached. Mrs. Brown, you've heard Christine's evidence as to what was promised in respect of the Flagstaff land. Can you inform the court as to what you uncovered as to the financial status of the family? Janelle breathed slowly, opened the folder in her lap, and drew out a sheaf of papers thick enough to elicit a murmur from the gallery. Yes, she replied. Initially, her voice was almost soothing, like a teacher breaking something down to a room full of children. For years, I managed a lot of my children's everyday budgeting. Groceries, school supplies, medical expenses, you name it. We wives shared resources, pooling money to ensure every child had what they needed. That was the pact. That was the trust. She turned a few pages back and went on. But eventually, things didn't add up anymore. Money I had thought would be there wasn't. Accounts that we all shared suddenly had restricted permissions. I started seeing discrepancies, withdrawals I hadn't made, transactions we couldn't explain. When I asked Kody, he said it was for family expenses. But when I prodded for specifics, he brushed me aside. She lifted her gaze for the first time, staring directly at Kody. I let it go on for too long. I trusted him. I thought he was shielding us. But then I discovered this. Janelle produced a highlighted bank statement, holding it aloft so the judge could view it. The room strained forward, desperate to hear every word. This, she declared, is a document showing $75,000 moved from the family account into an account in Kody Brown's name alone. No reason, no consultation, no consent from the rest of us. Gasps echoed around the room. Even the eyebrows of the judge flickered. This money, Janelle went on, was for our children's future, for housing expenses, for education savings, for the life we were all promised. Instead, it disappeared. When I questioned Kody about it, he said it was for business ventures. But when I asked to see documentation, to see any returns, any investments, he wouldn't let me see them. She set the paper down with a firm slap, the sound ringing in the quiet room. This wasn't careless bookkeeping. This was betrayal. $75,000. Lost, money that wasn't his to spend alone. Money that was ours. The gallery hummed like a hive that had been hit with a stick. Journalists wrote frantically. Hushed words echoed through the seats, and even the court clerk fidgeted uncomfortably in his seat. Robyn hid her face in her hands, silently sobbing. Christine locked her hands together, nodding minutely as if to say, "This is the evidence we needed." Meri sat up straighter, her gaze fierce, pleasure dashing across her face. "Liar," he bellowed, pounding his hand on the table. His lawyer attempted to catch hold of his arm, but he brushed it away, his voice echoing off the walls. "That money was for everyone. It was for the family. You understand that, Janelle?" The judge, however, was not going to tolerate that kind of behavior. He banged his gavel, and the loud crack cut through the pandemonium. "Mr. Brown, you will not interrupt this testimony once more, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." Kody slumped back in his chair, his chest pumping, his face flushed, but his eyes never wavered from Janelle. They brimmed with rage, desperation, fear, and Janelle, she didn't bat an eye. She turned another page in her folder, and went on. "This wasn't only one transfer," said Janelle, riffling through page after page of underlined documents. "It occurred several times, smaller chunks. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Always the same thing. Money from the joint account, transferred into Kody's personal account, always without comment." She glanced up, her gaze steely. "You have any idea what I had to do when I couldn't afford to pay for one of my children's medical expenses? I had to borrow from friends. I had to scrape together cash from side hustles. All while Kody was moving tens of thousands of dollars with no explanation." The gravity of her words hung in the air like a dense mist. Nobody said a word. Nobody stirred. The reality was unquestionable now, exposed in black and white letters. Janelle's tone softened, but the emotion only gave it more power. "Numbers don't lie, but in many ways they do. It's not just about the numbers. It's about what they represented. It's about a little girl who believed she would finally have her own bedroom, only to be informed it wasn't going to happen. It's about a son who required braces, but we had to wait because the money wasn't there. It's about years of sacrifices. Holidays we didn't take, clothes we didn't purchase, dreams we placed on the back burner, because we believed the money was being spent on us." She hesitated, her voice cracking only a little. But it wasn't. It was being used for him. The gallery fell silent once more, every ear intently listening to her words. Robyn breaks. At last the silence was broken, not by Janelle, but by Robyn. With a sob from her position next to Kody, she clutched at her tissue. "I saw the statements too," she whispered, although the microphone had no trouble picking it up. Her words wafted through the courtroom like an involuntary confession. "I told him it didn't look right, but I didn't stop him. I thought he knew best." Kody snapped his head around to her, his features twisted in shock and rage. Robyn, cut it out. But she couldn't. The die had been cast. The judge brought his gavel up again, demanding silence. Janelle closed her file, her testimony finished, but never taking her eyes from Kody's face. She had told them all she had to tell. The bomb had been detonated. The truth was out. As Janelle left the stand, Christine put out her hand and clasped it. Meri nodded resolutely, not saying a word, but smiling. Not even Robyn could suppress her tears any longer. Kody slumped in his chair, his reign of domination crumbling around him. He had commanded the dictates of their existence for years, used promises as cudgels, and made them promise to be quiet. But in this courtroom, there was no silence. The judge gazed down at his papers, his expression stern. "This court takes these charges seriously. The evidence put forth is persuasive, corroborated. This case will have significant bearing on my verdict." The courtroom was abuzz following Janelle's bombshell of a testimony. The phrase $75,000 still rang like thunder within everyone's heads. Kody sat stiff at the defense table, his cheeks burning with ire, as Christine and Janelle shared silent, smug glances. Meri sat calmly, her face revealing nothing but a faint smugness. But the gaze of the entire room gradually drifted to one person: Robyn. For years she had been the most staunch defender of Kody, his most devoted friend, the wife who remained with him even as the others departed. She had been characterized as the favorite, the one to whom what the rest did not get was allotted. And now, following Christine and Janelle's testimony, the world wanted to know, would Robyn remain mute, or would she now speak? As her name was announced, the room appeared to be taking a collective breath. Robyn was frozen, her tissue held tightly in her hand. Kody's head swiveled toward her, his eyes narrowing. "You don't have to say anything you don't want to," he whispered harshly. But Robyn did not respond. She stood up slowly, her body shaking, her face white. With faltering steps, she moved to the witness stand. Every movement under dozens of eyes, every breath magnified by the quiet in the room. She laid her hand on the Bible, voice barely above a whisper, as she replied, "I do." As she took her seat, she appeared smaller than ever before, hunched shoulders, nervously darting eyes scanning Kody, the judge and the wives sitting across the aisle. Her lawyer leaned in quietly. "Mrs. Brown, would you explain the court your view of the financial issues presented today?" Robyn wavered, her hands crumpling the tissue she held until it broke. For an instant it appeared that she would not speak, that allegiance to Kody would prevail. Then she did speak, her voice shaking, each word heavy with doubt. "I wanted to think Kody had a plan," she started quietly. "I wanted to think all of the things he said, that the money, the property, the choices were for the best of the family. I defended him. I figured if I just kept my mouth shut, if I trusted him, it would all work out somehow." Kody's jaw clenched, his eyes drilling into her, as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Robyn's voice caught, but it didn't make sense. And deep down, I knew it. A shiver of gossip ran through the courtroom. Christine pushed forward, eyes wide. Janelle crossed her arms, nodding discreetly. Even Meri arched her eyebrows in surprise at Robyn's concession. Robyn struggled with a folder she'd brought with her, fingers shaking so hard that some of the papers escaped and floated to the ground. She crouched down swiftly, gathering them up with trembling fingers. "Those are copies of things I saw." She held them up in shaky hands. "Transfers, withdrawals. I didn't catch everything, but I knew the money wasn't going where he said it was. I told him it didn't look right, but he always said don't worry." She pinched the tissue to her eyes, her voice cracking into sobs. "I remained quiet. I wanted to trust him. I thought if I questioned him, if I prodded too hard, I would be destroying the family. But now I see, I wasn't shielding the family, I was shielding him." Her words were like bombs. The gallery gasped. Some shook their heads. Others frantically wrote into notepads. Kody pounded his fist on the table, his voice thundering. "Robyn, stop this. You're making it worse. You know the truth. You know I did this for us." But Robyn shook her head, her eyes streaming with tears. "No, Kody, you did it for you." The judge slammed his gavel, demanding order. But no gavel could stem the wave of fury Robyn had just released. Robyn hid her face in both hands, her shoulders quivering as she wept uncontrollably. For years she had stood silently by Kody's side, bracing the brunt of the other wives' contempt, shouldering the burden of being the chosen one. And now, sworn in, under the harsh scrutiny of the law, that pillar shook. "I thought that loyalty equaled silence," she cried. "But truth without loyalty is just fear. And I've been in fear of so long. Fear of losing him. Fear of being alone. Fear of what people would say if I was wrong. And admitted it. But I couldn't just sit here and lie anymore." She spun for the first time, to confront Christine, Janelle and Meri. "You were right. All of you. And I'm sorry. I should have said something earlier. I should have stood with you." Christine's lips quivered, tears welling in her eyes. Janelle nodded resolutely, her face relaxing. Even Meri, impenetrable as always, blinked away emotion she couldn't keep back. Kody leaned in, his tone rough, pleading. "Robyn, don't do this. Don't you dare turn against me here. You know what this will mean if you join them. They'll take it all. They'll ruin us." But Robyn shook her head methodically, still crying. "No, Kody, you ruined us already. I just didn't want to notice." The ensuing silence was louder than his tantrum. Kody leaned back in his chair, his face contorted in anger and disbelief. His eyes shifted between the judge, the courtroom, and Robyn, as if waiting for someone to advocate for him. But no one did anymore. Judge Harrison hunched forward, his face serious. Mrs. Brown, for the record, under oath, you are affirming that you witnessed financial documents substantiating the allegations made by Mrs. Christine Brown and Mrs. Janelle Brown. Robyn rubbed her eyes, speaking in a shaking but audible voice. Yes, Your Honor, I witnessed them, and I did choose to turn a blind eye. And you are also affirming that you raised your concerns with Mr. Brown, and he overruled you? Yes, Robyn breathed. The judge nodded, his expression stern. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. You may stand down. As Robyn stepped up from the stand, the courtroom was stunned into silence. She began to make her way back to her seat, slowly, with her shoulders slumped and her tissue reduced to wet shreds. She did not sit next to Kody, though. Instead, she sat one seat away, the physical distance mirroring the gulf that had just been formed between them. Christine gestured across the aisle, her gaze gentle. Robyn looked at her for a moment, then down at her lap, too humiliated to meet her eyes. Robyn had been the shield that kept Kody blameless for all these years, the wall that deflected fault. But now that wall had fallen before the world. The room was abuzz with tension, reporters murmuring of betrayal, fans shaking their heads in outrage, some even crying. It wasn't testimony anymore. It was the breaking down of Kody's final defense. Before proceeding with the next witness, Judge Harrison spoke to the court. His voice was loaded with the gravity of what had just transpired. This case is not merely one of financial impropriety. It is one of trust, loyalty, and betrayal in a family. The evidence we've heard here today is profoundly disturbing, and this court takes it seriously. We will proceed with caution. But understand this: the truth has a way of emerging, regardless of how well it may be concealed. His gavel came down once, inscribing the words into the walls of the courtroom. Kody sat mute, in stunned silence, his skin pale, his kingdom falling apart brick by brick. Christine's flame had incinerated his vows. Janelle's testimony had torn his integrity to shreds. And now, Robyn, his most devoted follower, had cracked under the pressure of truth. He was no longer the head of a family. He was a man standing alone in a courtroom, betrayed not by strangers, but by those who had loved him most. The courtroom was now a war zone of truths. Christine had revealed the promises that were broken. Janelle had revealed the missing funds. Robyn, Kody's former last line of defense, had buckled under the pressure of her own shame, admitting to her silence before the entire world. By this point, the air in the room was taut, electric, imbued with the stress of a fractured family. The gallery was poised on tenterhooks, observers hanging on every breath, every look, anticipating the moment that would seal their fate. Kody Brown sat at the eye of it all. His commanding stance was lost, shoulders slumped, hands wrapped around the edge of the defense table. Pale, drawn face, Kody resembled nothing of the man fans used to watch on TV. Proud, booming, confident. He was a cornered man, an undone man, a man facing what was left of the empire he had created. And now the judge was prepared to render the verdict. Order in the court, Judge Harrison instructed firmly. Brandishing his gavel, the discussion in the courtroom gallery ceased immediately. Even the hum of the ceiling fans overhead seemed to grow silent. The judge pushed his glasses up his nose, his eyes scanning the room. He searched Christine, Janelle, and Meri, faces set, shoulders back, eyes looking at him with resolve. He searched Robyn, shattered white, blotting her eyes with the final fragment of tissue she possessed. And his eyes settled on Kody, slumped, stiff, refusing to look anyone in the eye. An unpleasant case, Judge Harrison started, his voice deep, calm, and deliberate. The testimony given has not only uncovered financial impropriety, but also a scheme of betrayal that goes much deeper than dollars and agreements. It's about trust, about broken promises, and this court does not take such situations lightly. He scanned through his notes, his words deliberate. Mrs. Christine Brown testified to promises made regarding the Flagstaff land. Documents were presented confirming these promises, alongside evidence of land sales conducted without her knowledge or consent. The court finds her testimony credible and supported by evidence. Christine exhaled shakily, tears brimming in her eyes. Janelle reached over and squeezed her hand. Mrs. Janelle Brown testified to lost money, amounting to $75,000, corroborated by bank statements and transaction histories. The court has considered these documents. They are authentic. They reflect clearly a pattern of money being paid into Mr. Brown's private account, without openness or authorization. The court finds the evidence persuasive. Janelle's mouth compressed into a tight line. Tears welled in her eyes. But her face was one of strength. She had waited years to have her vindication. Mrs. Robyn Brown gave evidence to having seen these financial records herself, and to the fact that she had raised this with Mr. Brown, which was brushed off. Her evidence, even in her conflicted position, supports the evidence already heard. Robyn hid her face, her shaking shoulders. The judge's tone darkened. In combination, the facts leave no doubt. Mr. Brown's behavior was not mere errors of sloppy judgment. It was intentional, dishonest, and hurtful to the very individuals who trusted him most. At last, Judge Harrison laid down his papers and faced Kody directly. "Mr. Brown," he said slowly, "this court is seriously troubled by your conduct. You presented yourself as the head of this family, as the manager of its finances and destiny. But rather than protecting your family's trust, you abused it. Rather than fostering togetherness, you planted discord. You were entrusted with authority, and you abused it." Kody swallowed hard. His mouth clamped shut, his face set in a mask of barely leashed anger and humiliation. The judge's eyes grew cold. "You were derelict in your duty, not just as a husband, but as a father, and the results of your actions are now yours to live with." The courtroom was so silent, the air so charged, that even the motion of the judge's pen on the bench caused heads to jerk. "Verily, it is the order of this court," Judge Harrison stated firmly, "that the Flagstaff properties are to be restored to joint ownership by Mrs. Kody Brown, Mrs. Janelle Brown, and Mrs. Meri Brown. In addition, restitution for the lost $75,000 will be sought. Brown is commanded to pay back these monies in full, plus penalties for fraudulent transfers." The gavel came down once, the report of which resonated like a gunshot. The courtroom was filled with gasps, whispers, and even stifled screams. Christine cried out, her face in her hands, as Janelle enveloped her in a hug. Meri was calm, breathing heavily, her eyes brimming with tears, her chin quivering with suppressed emotion. Robyn slumped forward, weeping hysterically, her frame shuddering as reality hit home about the verdict. And Kody? He froze, his mouth gaping open, his face white as if blood had left his body. His kingdom was lost. His authority was lost. His wives prevailed. Journalists rushed to get the shot. Pens scribbled wildly on notepads. Phones rang with texts and calls. And sketch artists hurried to get the fallen man at the center of it all. Christine brushed away her tears, her voice shaking as she leaned over to Janelle and whispered, "It's finally over." Janelle nodded resolutely. "We did it. For the children. For us." Meri leaned in, her tone low but resolute. "Justice. That's what this is." Robyn, still crying, stretched out towards Christine and Janelle. "Sorry," she sobbed through her tears. "I should have stood with you sooner." Christine's face softened, but she didn't say a word. Janelle put a hand lightly on Robyn's shoulder, a silent recognition that although wounds were deep, healing could someday exist. But Kody sat alone, gazing blankly at the table in front of him. He didn't glance at Robyn. He didn't glance at his other wives. He didn't glance at the judge. He was alone. Judge Harrison brought his gavel down once more, his voice stern. "This case is adjourned. But let it be a reminder, to everyone in this courtroom, and to everyone who might ever hear of this case, that trust is not something to be spent. It is the very basis of family, of love, of unity, and when that basis is shamed, justice must restore what is lost." The gavel came down again. Court was adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the doors opened, and the wives emerged into a tempest of flashing cameras, yelling reporters, and amazed fans. Christine, Janelle, and Meri exited side by side, heads held high, their solidarity a contrast to the broken man behind them. Christine gave a quick statement to the press. This wasn't revenge. This was truth. About keeping our children safe. And today, truth prevailed. Janelle added, her voice firm and determined. We trusted him too long. Today confirmed that silence just makes betrayal stronger. I hope no one else has to learn that lesson the way we did. Meri's words were brief but biting. Justice was served. Robyn trailed behind, tears still on her face, refusing to look into the cameras. Her silence spoke volumes. And then Kody. He strode out alone. Boos from the crowd. Reporters calling out questions he would not answer. His shoulders were hunched. His jaw clenched. He pushed through the cameras silently. But the picture was clear. Once the center of a family. Once the star of a show. Now a man fallen. Left behind. And shunned. As the wives vanished into awaiting cars. The final photo the cameras got was of Kody standing atop the courthouse steps. Alone. His dynasty destroyed. It wasn't the end of a trial. It was the end of a dynasty. The patriarch was down. The wives were up. And the Brown family's story would never ever be the same.